Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and good morning to our subject matter experts from United States. I welcome you all to this WINS Academy training program on integrating cybersecurity with the security program. This is organized in collaboration with WINS Academy, which is World Institute for Nuclear Security, and Amity Institute of Nuclear Science and Technology is collaborating with Indian Youth Nuclear Society. I welcome you to this 5-day training program, which is dedicated on to the cybersecurity aspects. I request our Director and Head, Professor Dr. Arpana Goel, to kindly start with the welcome remarks. Ma'am, please.
He who spread information is a friend. He who spread knowledge is a teacher. He who spread guidance is respectable. But he who spread innovation is indistinguishable from the divine. Welcome one and all. Today, on this auspicious day, I, Dr. Arpana Goel, welcome all of you to the WINS Academy training on integrating cybersecurity with the security program. The workshop is being organized in collaboration with Amity University, Uttar Pradesh, Indian Youth Nuclear Society, and WINS for a week-long program starting today, and it will go up to 26 September. The program will be from 6 to 8 p.m. every day. The workshop will be conducted remotely for all the 5 days. No matter how difficult situation is due to pandemic, there is always something we can do and succeed at. We learn from every challenge of our life. A positive person always finds good things from the worst. We are also trying. First of all, I would like to welcome and thanks to Honorable Founder President Sir Dr. Ashok K. Chauhan, who is a man of passion and vision, a great visionary person behind all Amitians. Because of his unparalleled vision, we are able to take challenges time to time. He always encourages and motivates us. Nuclear science and technology is amongst his dream institution. Founder President Sir started this institution at Amity University, Uttar Pradesh, Noida campus when other major organizations cannot even think about it. This institution was started in year 2009. Sir, I would like to convey my sincere thanks to him for accepting our invitation and to elevate us at this great occasion with his benign presence. We are deeply honored to welcome you. Thank you, sir, for coming and joining us. I would like to convey my sincere thanks to our Chancellor, Dr. Atul K. Chauhan, a young dynamic leader and source of motivation for all of us. Thank you so much, sir, for believing in us. I would like to welcome and thanks to Vice Chancellor, Professor Dr. Balvinder Shukla, a great leader. It gives great experience to work under her leadership. She is our mentor and a driving force behind the success of this event. She always provides her full support to this institution. On behalf of Amity University, Uttar Pradesh, we are deeply appreciative and offer our grateful welcome to the team members, especially event facilitator Daniel Johnson, Senior Advisor WINS, Project Supporter Ms. May, Administrative Assistant in WINS, Subject Expert from Miss Karen Kallenberg, Human Reliability Program Team Lead, Oak Ridge National Laboratory, Mr. Dave Lambert, Senior Security Specialist and Training Manager, JIT Protection Services, and Dr. Don Duderhofer, Senior Cybersecurity Consultant for Virat Nuclear Power Plant, former Senior Cybersecurity Lead IAEA. Welcome you all at Amity. It is my pleasure to welcome it is my pleasure to extend a cheerful and welcome to keynote speaker Shri S.A.V. Satyamurthy, distinguished scientist and former director IGCAR DAE, and also other distinguished scientists and dignitaries from DAE, NIAS, BRC, and other reputed Indian organization who accepted our invitation for the inaugural of the event and also enlightening us to be a part of panel. With all my sincerity, I would like to thank Professor Dr. W. Silvamurthy, President STF, a man of versatile and passion. He has a special interest in nuclear science and he always provides us support and guidance. I welcome you, sir. I feel honored to welcome our alumni who happily accepted to be a part of the event. I would like to express my heartiest welcome to all colleagues from different parts of India who took out time from their busy schedule to attend the training program on a very specific and important topic. Last but not the least, and in fact, most importantly, the participant. So it is a matter of honor to welcome participants of the training program. Without their presence and active participation, no event could reach the heights of the sky. I welcome all senior colleagues, faculty members, research students, and students of AINST, Amity University, and other research organizations, universities, and industries. It is commendable that even at a peak time of the COVID-19, WINS and AINST are collaborating to conduct this workshop remotely and making the information and experience available to all of us. If hard work is your weapon, success will be your slave. With these words, I wish a grand success for the event. Thank you all.
Thank you, ma'am. Before moving forward with the agenda of today's workshop, I request our Honorable Founder President, Sir, to bless us for a smooth progression of our event. Sir, please.
I am very glad to be part of this program, 5 days training, and I compliment and appreciate all from World Academic Institute of Nuclear Security WINS, and also all members of Indian Youth Nuclear Society. I'm very much enthusiastic and encouraged that these my young brains are also participating in it. Before I go ahead, with the permission of Dr. Alpana Goyal, I will tell you a small instance. One day, the blood testing lab rang me, sir, there is something very serious about Dr. Alpana Goyal, and we don't want to share it with her family, but you being the family head, we are sharing with you. She got her blood tested today, and there is some very unidentified marker in it, and it is very serious. We have never seen it. I told, don't worry, what is it? They told this marker is, this element is NST. I told, oh my goodness, forget about it. This is nuclear science and technology. Don't worry, you print the report without this marker, because Alpana is not only passionate, but she's obsessed from NST, and the God has given us our Dr. A.K. Jain from Roorkee, who is a great, not only theoretical, but also practical nuclear scientist. And all those who are in my Institute of Amity Nuclear Science and Technology are most committed and dedicated. Later on during this workshop, we will also tell you what the great project we are starting with the American authorities. The Flagwell will tell it. It's a huge thing in India together in collaboration with America. So I'm very proud that this program is being held, and I would not be able to name all because of time paucity, but our Daniel Johnson, our Satyamurthy ji, and all my alumni, students, and also especially Archana for taking all these efforts to make it successful. I think we are making a roadmap for nuclear security in the India. The next wars, you know it, they are the cyber wars, they are the nuclear wars. And the government of India requested Dr. W. Silmamurthy to work from Amity side more on CBRN, chemical, biological, radiological, and nuclear, and especially with biodefense. So we are working very hard. That is why I called Dr. M.P. Kaushik, who is my pro-vice chancellor of Amity University, Gwalior, Madhya Pradesh, because he has been long years the director and head of the DRDE, the DRDO institution. So Dr. Alpana Goyal, you are touching a very important area. I started this institution before even the nuclear deal was signed.
Yes, sir.
I could see that the Indian brain connected with the American and brains from other country, I call it synergy of brain, we can do wonders. And the passion my people in this institution headed by Dr. Alpana Goyal have, we can change the scenario in the nuclear security and cyber security. And I have to go, as she told, in another webinar at 6:30. We are holding this webinar in our Amity University, Long Island, New York campus. The topic is Ayurveda in USA. I've got a global research hub there, 175 acres in New York. And there I would also, Alpana ji, will make a scientific lab for nuclear science and technology so that the scientists from all over the world stay there and work day and night. So I today announced that you will get a good place.
Yes, sir. Thank you, sir.
Lab there.
Sir, definitely we will have the collaboration with the US. There are many organizations.
Correct.
We already have the collaboration with them.
Correct. And
yes,
they will
sir.
take a base there. And
Okay,
because being Jain Saab with us, we can achieve everything. So I give a good start, but I'll come again in the next coming days. I'm very much interested to listen to the lectures. And I have got told to Dr. Sodi to record this all. Those who could not see it, I would like to see them, show them, so that we pursue this mission with all heart and mind and body. Thank you very much.
Thank you,
sir.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much, sir, for coming and for giving us the time.
Thank you, sir.
This boosts up our energy, sir. Yes, now we are comfortable. We can do our work for the 5 days.
I'm with you.
Yes, sir. Your coming is very beneficial. We got the full energy.
Alpana, you have so much passion that I am always with you.
Yes, sir.
You are doing
Thank you,
wonders,
sir.
and you will do wonders. We are proud
Thank
of
you, sir. Thank you so much, sir.
Proud of you.
So moving ahead with the agenda, can I please share my screen? Yes. So the next, we're moving up with the agenda, and we have Mr. Daniel Johnson, Senior Advisor, North America for the World Institute for Nuclear Security, and he'll be providing us some information about the agenda and how we are going to move ahead with the workshop. Daniel, sir, please.
Thank you, Archana. Hello, good afternoon, everybody. Good morning from the other side of the world here in California. It's amazing what we can do with technology. I'm delighted to join you for this workshop delivered in partnership with Amity University, the Amity Institute of Nuclear Science and Technology, and the Indian Youth Nuclear Society. I'd like to start by thanking the founder, Dr. Ashok, for joining us and blessing the proceedings. We very much appreciate it. Thank you, sir. We briefly met at our workshop last year at Amity, and it's a pleasure to see you again and connect our brains, as you say. I'm excited to hear about all of your initiatives to support nuclear security and your collaborations with the United States as well. So thank you again, sir. Also, thank you to the Vice Chancellor for helping us to organize this event. And of course, I'd like to thank Dr. Goel, Dr. Yadav, and all of the Amity staff for helping to organize this event. I know you've all been working very hard under quite trying circumstances to bring this event together, and I very much appreciate it. I'd also like to thank all of the Amity alumni who are participating, helping with the exercises and sharing their experience over the next week. Finally, I'd like to thank all of the Indian and international experts who are joining us to present and share their knowledge. We're quite lucky to have such a talented group of experts joining us for this week. This is the third event now I've held in partnership with Dr. Goel and her team at Amity, so we know each other very well, and it's a great pleasure to work with you again. Obviously, the last two workshops were held at Amity University, so I'm sorely disappointed that we have to do this remotely, but we'll still have a great experience this week and a lot of opportunities to learn. I think the topic for this training course is particularly interesting. So previously at Amity, we've held events focused on threat assessment, insider threats, key physical protection concepts, security risks, and security culture, amongst other topics. This time, we'll again cover those same topics like physical protection and insider threats, but we've added this new twist to focus the event around cybersecurity. To give a little context about why this is so important, earlier this year, my organization, WINS, surveyed our over 6,000 members on the state of nuclear security globally. We asked them a series of questions about what they see as the primary challenges for the security of nuclear facilities and material over the next decade. And we had a huge number of responses from our members, and I think we could probably qualify it as the largest survey of nuclear security practitioners ever undertaken. And in aggregate, our members told us that cybersecurity was the #1 challenge facing the industry. So this is an extremely timely and important topic in an area where there are major gaps, but also great opportunities for the young professionals joining us to find solutions to these various cybersecurity challenges and also identify career opportunities. What I'd like to do now is you all should have a copy of the agenda, and I'd like to briefly review that with you. We have a number of objectives, but in my mind, the primary objective is kind of really twofold in two parts. First, I'd like us to expose you all to the topic of cybersecurity at nuclear facilities and help you get a very basic understanding of the threats and challenges and how cybersecurity interacts with other security measures at nuclear facilities. And I want to get you inspired to further investigate the topic and undertake additional opportunities to develop your expertise and then apply it in the future when you enter the nuclear workforce. To get you started, you may have been contacted by our WINS Academy team to offer you a scholarship to enroll free of charge in our WINS Academy. And we have a training module on cybersecurity there. And you can earn a certificate from WINS upon completing the training and passing exams. So I hope you take advantage of this opportunity. Okay, back to the agenda. Today we have two presentations from renowned experts, Dr. Murthy and then Dave Lambert, on the fundamentals of cybersecurity and how physical protection systems are vulnerable to cyber threats, respectively. After each presentation, we'll have 15 minutes for Q&A, so please think of your questions while the presentations are happening and take the opportunity to ask the experts your questions. At the end of today, I will introduce an exercise to undertake a cybersecurity assessment for a fictitious nuclear facility. You will undertake this exercise in teams during days 2 and 4 of the course, and then present your team findings on day 5. You'll present your findings to Don Dudenhofer, which is an amazing opportunity to get feedback from perhaps the most known international expert on cybersecurity for nuclear facilities. Don literally wrote the book on what we will be working on. So you have some amazing experts, some amazing resources this week. On day 3 of the course, we will have additional expert presentations. Karen Kaldenbach, who you probably already know quite well there because she has worked very closely with Amity over the past few years, is an expert on insider threat and has a background in computer science. She'll be presenting on the connection of these two topics, and this is critically important. As you'll hear, insider threat is something we probably worry about more than just about anything else in the nuclear security world. After Karen, we will get to have some fun with a panel of distinguished experts taking the opportunity to further explore the topics we've been discussing. We've asked the panelists to make some brief remarks, and we hope to have most of this session focused on interaction with you, the students. So please come armed with your best questions. On day 4, we're going to do further work on the exercise mentioned, and then on day 5, you'll do your team presentation to Don, followed by a career discussion with Amity alumni who are now working in the field. And we hope this final session will help you come away from this training course with ideas for taking your career forward and hopefully incorporate some of these concepts that we're going to be discussing. So thank you all for your attention, and I look forward to working with you all over the next 5 days. Thank you all again. You're muted, Archana.
Mute.
Am I audible now?
Yes.
Sorry. Thank you, Daniel sir, for the excellent remarks and giving us at least a guideline as to how we have to proceed through the next coming 4 days. We move ahead with the first presentation of our workshop, which will be on fundamentals of cybersecurity for nuclear facilities, as Mr. Daniel Johnson just mentioned. I would like to request Professor Dr. Alpana Goyal to kindly introduce the speaker to our audience. Thank you, ma'am. Ma'am, are you there?
Yes.
Ma'am, if you could please introduce our speaker.
Yeah.
SEV Satyamurthy.
Yes.
Thank you, ma'am.
Yes, Dr. S.V. Satyamurthy worked in a very senior position with more than 40 years in a Department of Atomic Energy, Government of India. He superannuated as Distinguished Scientist and Director of Indira Gandhi Center for Atomic Energy, IGCAR, Kalpakkam, one of the internationally renowned and second largest multidisciplinary R&D organization of Department of Atomic Energy. Subsequently, he worked as Rajaramana Fellow of Department of Atomic Energy for about 2 years. He also worked as Acting Executive Director of Society for Electronic Transaction and Security. He has an outstanding R&D experience of about 40 years in various domains of computer science, electronics and communication, and instrumentation and control. He has an outstanding academic record. He was a university gold medalist in his BTech from Jawaharlal Nehru Technological University and Homi Bhabha gold medalist in the 1-year orientation course in nuclear science and technology at BARC Mumbai, and PhD from Homi Bhabha National Institute. Dr. Satyamurthy has received many awards, the notable awards amongst them being INS Outstanding Service Award in 2011 from Indian Nuclear Society in the category of nuclear reactor technology, including reactor safety, Group Achievement Award as Group Leader in year 2011, in 2012, and also in 2014 by DAE, Lifetime Achievement Award by Institute of Engineers, Kalpakkam chapter in the year 2016. Dr. S.A.V. Satyamurthy is currently working as Director Research of Vinayak Mission Research Foundation, a deemed to be university. We welcome you, sir. Now floor is yours, sir.
Thank you, Dr. Alpana Goyal. It's a pleasure to meet you all on this virtual platform. Maybe I would have been more happier had you visited Amity University, which I heard a lot about. Very good evening to Dr. Ashok Chauhan, Dr. A.K. Jai. Good morning to Dr. Daniel and Dr. Alpana Goyal. when Dr. Alpana Goyal contacted me to give a talk in this particular series of workshop on cyber security in nuclear facilities, I was very happy in the sense that this is an area which is very dear to my heart, and I have worked about more than 30 years in cyber security, mostly in IT systems, and about more than 10 years in cyber security in nuclear facilities. So I thought that I should share my experience with young colleagues, and I'm very happy that many young colleagues and faculty members are present in the audience. I'll share my presentation without much ado. It is 6:30 now, and my time starts now. Can you please share the screen?
Yeah, sir, sure. Please check, sir.
You're able to see now?
Yes,
Yes,
sir.
sir.
In fact, the topic that is given to me is the fundamentals of cyber security. Today, the cyber security has become such a important but commonly known topic, and it is taught in the engineering colleges and undergraduate courses. I thought that I shouldn't spend my time and my experience of 35 years talking about fundamentals of cyber security, but I'll give a brief introduction about cyber security and then jump onto the cyber security in nuclear facilities and how we should protect our nuclear installations from cyber attacks. As you all know that what is cyber security, obviously I have to give a brief introduction. It is nothing but a process of protecting the confidentiality, integrity of data stored in computers and that data that is being transmitted, and ensuring the availability of the servers. This could be, in fact, there are two types of systems there, where computing systems and IT-enabled systems. And computing systems are there where we do number crunching, and IT-enabled systems are the various database servers, whether it is airline booking or railway booking or banking transactions and something of that sort. The second category is process control systems or SCADA system, that is supervisory control and data acquisition systems, where the security is a different cup of tea because the consequences could be different. What are the various threats to various computer systems? The main threats are loss of confidentiality. Somebody peeps into your information and looks it, which you may or may not like it, and maybe you may be stealing your intellectual property. And loss of integrity, it is something very serious that somebody is changing the contents of particular your data that is in transmission or even data that is in storage. Say, for example, I am transmitting 10,000 rupees to my friend. They should not add, somebody should not add a zero or change the account number and create some problems. Loss of availability, the system should be available all the time. Today, if sit before the laptop and Google something, if you don't get the response in few seconds, you will be unhappy. And same is true for any of the database servers. And loss of reliability, any of these things are compromised. Obviously, the system will not be able to provide the services which it is supposed to do. From where these attacks are coming? The attacks are coming basically from outsiders. This could be because our networks are connected to the external world through the internet. So people do creep in with malwares and gain access to the external our internal networks, and they do create problems like what I mentioned, like confidentiality, lot of integrity and availability, or they could even see that your server is shut down, causing a denial of service attack. And the second category is attacks by insiders. In fact, we are going to have a panel discussion on that. This is something very, very serious. Being part of the system, if that person is trying to attack our important systems, is something very serious. And it's much easier for the insider to do it because he has access to the complete system. He can switch off a computer system, he can put a pen drive into the system and release a malware, and he can change the parameters. So for example, I want my reactor to be shut down at when the temperature reaches 580 degrees centigrade. He makes it 80 degrees I mean, reactor will not be shut down. Of course, the reactors are not just dependent on one particular parameter, and reactors are quite safe, and they are designed to be safe, and they can create any problems. And the third category is a combination of actions from both insiders and outsiders. This is something very, very serious. This is some sort of state-sponsored terrorism, where somebody is instigating, somebody from outside is instigating insiders to do this for some benefit. The potential hazard potential is quite high. The problems which you can create are both the things which we have talked about. I mentioned to you there are two types of systems are there. One, general IT systems, which we use for our computing and IT enabled services. Another thing is industrial control systems. The priority of the confidentiality, integrity, availability, you could see on the screen. For general IT systems, confidentiality is extremely important, integrity is important, availability is okay. Even if the server is down for 10 minutes, events are not going to fall. It is fine. But that's not the case with industrial control systems which are used in nuclear facilities. The server has to be available all the time because it is going to take a important decision. If the server is down, the reactor will be down immediately. So availability is important. Obviously, integrity is important, as I mentioned to you. Any of the safety parameters somebody should not change. And confidentiality is not that important in the sense that whether of course it depends on the context in which we are using. So, for example, if you are doing something in a fuel enrichment facility, obviously nobody would like them to see the thing which you are doing. But if it is a normal the industrial control system, so for example, what parameters I have set for temperature, pressure, or level or something, it's not so confidential. This is the broad priority levels for general IT systems and industrial control systems. I mentioned about SCADA, that is nothing but the supervisory control and data acquisition systems, which are computer based, which are used for processing various parameters of the plant. And the plant could be, it could be anything. It could be an automobile plant, it's a power plant, or a refinery, or anything for that matter. And the advantages of going for computer based systems are you can process, log, decide, control, RQ, and better HMI. This is not the case when the nuclear, at least I will confine myself to the nuclear facilities. Nuclear facilities have been existing from late 50s, and from 60s onwards, many reactors were started operating. But those are all analog systems, and there were never a problem in that other than system failing. In nuclear facilities, the safety is extremely important. Safety is extremely important. We talk about safety, and security here helps in providing the safety. And the reason for the important safety when you talk about nuclear facilities, come what may, whether it is because of malfunctioning of a system, or insider threat, or outside threat, or a hacking of a computer system, there should never be a release of radiation to the plant workers or the outside world. This is the important thing which we nuclear people are bothered about. So, but we always think about, especially the people not connected with nuclear facilities, think that nuclear facilities are extremely secure. They do take many precautions. Yes, we do take many precautions, and systems are pretty secure when compared to the anti-enabled systems. And whether security risks are there in SCADA systems also. Just let me give you a few examples to say that yes, we are also vulnerable. So, for example, Ohio nuclear power plant, a slammer worm penetrated a private computer network at Ohio's Davis Basin nuclear power plant in January 2003 and disabled a safety monitoring system for 6 hours. Safety monitoring system is something supposed to be very crucial for the smooth operation of the reactor. How it happened was the contractor was there in the campus, and he had a broadband connection or a modem connection to his computer from outside world, not from the Davis Basin, and for transacting with the account staff, he had a unauthorized connection to the internet, and the internet has unauthorized connection to the plant network. Through this, the worm penetrated into the plant network, and the system was the security system was shut down for about 6 hours. Fortunately, the reactor was in a shutdown maintenance condition at that point of time, so nothing had happened. Let us see some of other incidents in 2006, Downferry nuclear power plant in Alabama was manually shut down after failure of both the control reactor pumps and reactor circulation pumps and condensate demineralizer controller. The condensate demineralizer depends on PLCs and recirculation pumps depend on VFDs. What happened was it's not really known till date, at least it has not been reported whether there was an attack or a malfunction. There is large amount of traffic was created from the PLCs, and in the process the reactor had to be manually shut down by the operator. In Hatch nuclear power plant in 2008, the system had to be shut down after an engineer applied a software update to a single computer in the plant's business network. Mind you, it's business network, not plant network. But that particular engineer has a connection with a network which is in the part of the plant network, and they are synchronized. And he has applied a update and he has rebooted his system, and obviously because the systems are resynchronized, the computer which is doing some processing function within the plant network also got shut down, and the operators thought and the system thought that there is a sudden drop in the reactor's water reservoir levels, and it initiated an automatic shutdown. In Japanese Monju reactor in 2014, one of the 8 computers of the reactor was compromised by a cyber attack. Experts observed that intrusion started after an employee updated a free video playback application running on one of the computers in the plant. In fact, this is something to be taken care of, that any system without knowing the credentials of the job which you are, or the process which you are downloading, you shouldn't download and execute. When you have downloaded it and it has created a problem, it was having a malware and it has compromised the machine, malware attacked, and it has exfiltrated the information. And in South Korea, a system was hacked in 2014, and the plant authorities have reported that they didn't steal any critical data. Obviously meant some data has gone out, the critical data has not gone out. That is what official information is, and there was no risk to the nuclear installations across the country. And this is in Germany, in Gundermagen nuclear power plant in 2016. A virus was discovered in the nuclear power plant. Based on the initial investigations conducted by the expert, virus did not affect any critical parts of the power plant. Again, you please see the wording. It didn't affect the critical parts. Obviously, it affected the power plant. And the surprising thing is 18 removable data drives are also having the malware. Stuxnet computer worm, we all know, in Iran nuclear enrichment facility, the amount of havoc it has caused in June 2010, and the programmable logical controllers are affected, and the centrifuges had started rotating at twice the speed, and the plant got damaged. You could see here from these incidents, I have given at least just 6 incidents. I have at least a few more. The instrumentation and control systems of the nuclear power plants are so well designed that no decision is taken by the plant by single parameter. They do take decision on multiple dependent parameters. So you could see, even if there was a cyber attack in these nuclear facilities, no damage has been done other than loss of services that our system is supposed to provide. As I mentioned to you, the nuclear facilities are existing since 1950s, and from 1960s onwards, many reactors have become operational. And as on today, we have 400 plus nuclear reactors are operating, and many other nuclear facilities are also operating. But in the initial years till 90s, all the systems are analog systems, because we have gone to digital, and of course the cyber attack technology has gone more matured, I would say, though it's not the right word. people started feeling the problems. But why did we go digital at all? Had we lived in an analog world, these problems wouldn't have been there, because we do see, I don't know how far it is true, that Pentagon still uses 8-inch floppy drives, and Russians use vacuum tubes still for from security reasons. So why did we go digital? Because when the technology is changing, technology is bringing many advantages. When computers are bringing many advantages, you are able to process various parameters in a short time. We are able to archive the data. We are able to control the reactor with the computers. And when these many advantages are being provided, obviously, just because of security, we shouldn't run away from the new technology, but we should face the security problem heads on and solve our problems. How the world has moved as far as digital identity systems are concerned, as I mentioned to you, 1950 onwards, we have analog-based computer systems, analog-based control systems in the nuclear facilities. The first thing started in 1996, fully digital identity system was integrated in advanced boiling reactor in Kashiwazaki Kariwa reactor, followed by reactor number 7. Similar digital identity systems are used in Hamoka 5 and Tomari, which feature all digital reactor control rooms. Even today, if you go, in many of the places, we have a mixture of both analog and digital. These two reactors have got fully digital. You find only digital displays only. You don't find any analog controls. France, UK, Korea, Sweden, and other countries also have implemented digital identity systems in their nuclear power plants. And Russia also has implemented digital identity systems. And Republic of Korea also has implemented in 1000 megawatt electrical pressurized water reactors in their computer systems. What is USNRC's position? Normally, his colleagues are much more cautious. What is USNRC has expected? It has taken quite a long time for them to accept the technology, and they have first given the approval in 2010, January 2010, to replace the 1970s era analog solid state controllers, Oconee nuclear station's reactor protection system, and that has become digital. And to say that the NRC has been cautious in its attitude towards digital technology at the country's nuclear power plants would be an understatement, and it took a long time to reach the Oconee milestone. But it's true that now the whole world, all the countries which are operating the nuclear power plants are going for digital. So that is the technology. Now we have to find out how do we protect it. Another advantage which we find through computer-based systems is you are having a better human system interface. Because of that, everything is digital. Earlier, I do not know in the participants how many are fairly elder. You could see in earlier systems operator going with a logbook, going to each and every panel and noting down the readings continuously, not just one operator, multiple operators, because the parameters are very, very important. Now you see just a few operators sitting on their desktop with consoles and controlling the total reactor. So computation has helped in many talks, and it has made the life of the reactor operator much more comfortable. It has helped in many other ways also. We could do more efficient operations and maintenance due to the human system interface, and we are able to improve the plant availability and safety and at a reduced cost. And also the new digital systems have brought in additional capabilities like self-diagnostic features. So for example, my processor is running smooth or not, my memory is running smooth, working properly or not. I can run background depending on the processing power, some self-diagnostic programs, which enables me to see that my system is safe. And we could do digital recalibration, screening, and validation of input signals. This is another important thing. So for example, I expect my temperature to be between 300 to 500 degrees. If I measure the temperature is 50 degrees, that means the thermocouple is not working properly. I will be able to validate my input signals also. These things are all possible going for digital. Everything looks fine. What is preventing us for going for digital computer systems controlled nuclear facilities? The problem is the cyber security. This is the one which is haunting us and preventing us, or not preventing us, rather is become a challenge for all the computer operators or reactor operators, reactor maintenance engineers. Well, we have decided that we should go for digital. What do we protect it? We have to protect various critical digital assets, the systems connected with safety critical operations, important to safety functions. We have to protect security functions. I am repeating, it is a security function, it is not a safety function. Where security function is coming in a reactor. So for example, you are having a control room, you are having a authenticated biometric authentication system for entering into the control room. So for example, somebody has hacked that particular control system, that particular computer, and in the process, when there is a problem in the reactor control room, people are not able to enter in the control room. So the security functions are also equally important. Emergency preparedness functions are extremely important, and including offsite communications also important, because in case of an incident, the offsite communications play a very important role. Support systems that if compromised would adversely impact safety, security, and emergency preparedness functions. These are the various critical digital assets which we have to protect. If we don't do, what will happen? How the incidents are really happening in INC systems. Networks, when we have a series of computers, so for example, if we take a typical power plant, at least we have 100 plus control computer systems will be there. There obviously, once you have computers, so many computers, they're all connected in the network, and the network, if it is connected to the external world or even otherwise to the internet, a malware can enter the system, and it can enter the critical digital assets and create a problem. And users, operators are also one type of users, though they have a additional responsibility. They can conduct any malicious activity directly to the critical digital assets. This is the insider threat. The computer operator, the reactor operator sitting inside the control room and creating doing a malicious activity which is directly affecting a critical digital assets. The only solution is you provide appropriate access controls to them and ensure that the things are authenticated and accountability has to be fixed. With whenever there is a problem in the computers, because nowadays we talk about nuclear reactors operating for 40 to 60 years, so the systems also have to work, the INC systems also work for such a long period. So the problems are bound to happen in such a long period. So whenever there is a problem, reactor operator calls the maintenance engineer, engineer comes with a laptop and immediately wants to connect it to the network through the switch. And what is the guarantee that that laptop doesn't have any malwares, and the malwares are getting injected into the plant network? So we have to be very careful when we are connecting any external device. And as I mentioned to you, one of the advantages of going for computer based systems is it is able to archive the data. So for example, if you want to know what happened for this particular incident 1 year back, 2 years back, the information, various parameters are available archived on the data system, and your disk storage is limited. So at some point of time you have to take a backup. So you connect the external hard disk drive or a USB drive and take the backup. But what is the guarantee that these drives are safe and it doesn't have any malware? So we have to be careful. So if any incident happens, what are the possible consequences that can happen for a nuclear facility? Blocked or delayed flow of information through to industrial control and system networks, that is in a real-time computer systems, which are the networks which we use in nuclear facilities and nuclear reactors in particular. The real-time operation is extremely important. If you block the response that is coming from the plant and delay it, there could be some serious consequences, especially if it is a safety critical operation. Unauthorized changes to the instructions or the parameters, which again operator can create a problem. You can change the parameters, as I mentioned to you. Reactor has to be shut down when temperature crosses certain limit, when pressure crosses certain limit, the temperature, the reactor has to be shut down. All these things happen automatically, but I am going to change that particular parameter. The operator is changing the parameter, or an external fellow is changing the parameter. That is changing the, compromising the integrity of the system is going to be a problem. Inaccurate information sent to the operators. For example, he may say that reactor is operating safely at 500 megawatts or 570 degrees centigrade, but actually the temperature is something different. He is disguising the malware program which is sitting, is disguising and sending a wrong information to the operator so that operator doesn't tag. We have in IN systems multiple defense and depth systems are there. In spite of all that, finally the operator steps in and manually shuts down the reactor. So that option should be available and no wrong information should ever go to the reactor operator. ICS software or configuration settings shouldn't can be modified if the incidents are happening. Interfere with the operation of the equipment, especially the protection systems, which could endanger costly or difficult to replace equipment. Interfere with the operation of the safety system, which could endanger the human life. Once a person comes inside, once a hacker comes inside, whether he is an external fellow or internal fellow, and he is changing the parameters, and if it so happens that of all the systems fail, and if it is going to cause any safety incident, it's certainly something serious which could endanger the human life. So what are the various strategies which we should take to protect ourselves? Running away from digital technology is not the solution. Providing security, cyber security is the solution, and these are some of the strategies which different people follow throughout the world. I'm not talking about any specific reactor either in India or abroad. I'm talking about general good practices which have to be followed. The cyber security has to be part of design. It shouldn't be an afterthought, because afterthought patchwork will always be a patchwork. It should be part of a design basis security. You develop a robust software using standard methodologies, using languages like Mishrashi. Independent verification and validation is very important step now, because once you have a computer, there are going to be executives, there are going to be application softwares. They are all developed by human beings. There are bound to be mistakes. So there is they have to be verified and validated by independent authorities, not by the same people. And have a configuration change management scheme. This is again very important. Whenever there is some problem in the reactor gets shut down, and immediately reactor operator calls the maintenance engineer. Maintenance engineer comes and jumps onto the system and makes some changes in the parameters, and he thinks that he got the lesson of his life and goes away. He doesn't record the changes which he has made in the system, and sometime later, if the same problem has come, he doesn't know what changes he has made, and proper record doesn't exist. So configuration change is also extremely important. Never connect plant network to organization's internet. Never connect plant network to internet directly or indirectly. These things are something as a policy. Never do this connection. Once you connect to internet, obviously all the people will be browsing, and there are many systems which are affected will be there in the internet. And if you connect to the internet directly or indirectly, you are bound to face problems, and you cannot afford to have problems in nuclear facilities. Follow the same security standards for development systems also, not the systems that are there in the part of the plant. So for example, I am developing the software, I have developed the software, I have tested with the simulator, everything is working smoothly, it's fine. I have gone, okay, tomorrow morning I will come and burn in my EEPROM. Today I have gone, tomorrow morning I will come and forward on system, I have seen my mails, and then I start burning. What is the guarantee that meanwhile a malware has entered my system? So all the precautions which we are taking, like not connecting to internet have to be followed for development systems also. Impart required training for designers, operators, and maintenance staff. What are the various, I am coming to nitty-gritty. What are the various things which we do? Apply patches to operating system and all application packages. In the beginning, which we certainly have to do, there is no other go. And afterwards, there is always a fight between reactor operator and the maintenance engineer. Whenever a patch comes, reactor operator says, no, my system is working smoothly, why don't disturb it? And the maintenance engineer says that already there are vulnerabilities known throughout the world, and if you don't apply the patch, system can be affected. And we have to find out a appropriate mechanism where we test these things on a development system, see there are no vulnerabilities, and then when the system is shut down or when system can be taken off, we can apply these patches. Least privilege, this is extremely important, which we always neglect. We thought that we can make friends with all the people by giving all privileges to all the people. Never do that. Defense in depth. This is again, when you are talking about nuclear reactors or nuclear facilities, this is one word which you hear quite often, defense in depth. Don't rely, never rely on one particular system. At least you have some 4 or 5 systems, 4 or 5 different levels of systems, depending on different technologies, so that even if one system fails with the same parameters, at least other system will be working. There should be a choke point so that all the authentication controls which you have designed and implemented are working smoothly. Fail state stance, even if one system fails, other systems should be able to work. Don't rely on the same make, same brand systems, so that if some software is failing or a hardware is failing, there is every possibility that all the systems fail at the same time. Diversity of defense, this is again the same thing which I'm talking about. Good security policies, this is extremely important. We are very, very good at making the security policy. We laugh when people say that security policy is important, but the problem is we don't follow it. This is very important. The security policy should be for universal participation. And because my CMD is sitting in the next building, he wants to know the status of my reactor. Don't give through a modem connection or through internet connection to him, so that he will be able to see from his desktop, or if he has gone outside the out of station, he wants to 3C Wi-Fi, the condition of the plant, never ever give the thing. And there are sometimes maintenance engineers, they say that will remotely maintain you, please provide a connection to me. Never give that. And we have to provide the security policy has to be followed. And in spite of all the precautions, we have to do periodical security auditing and see that there are no vulnerabilities in my systems which we are having. If I do security auditing and say that my system is okay at 6:45 on 22nd, it is good at 6:40 at 22nd. You cannot say at 6:46 at on 22nd whether my system is safe or not. We cannot really say. Vulnerabilities keep coming round the clock on all the 365 days. So we have to periodically do security auditing. And in spite of all the precautions, systems things may go bad. You should have a backup policy. If possible, you should have a offsite backup policy also. Cyber security drill in case something goes wrong. How the reactor, because these things do not happen on a daily basis. We do provide training to reactor operators on normal operations. So, for example, if a cyber incident happened, how the operator has to react, this also has to be taught to him. So, cyber security drill has to be done at a periodicity, and make it a habit to see log files very frequently. And if you see the hacking incidents throughout the world for any facility, be it nuclear, non-nuclear, or IT systems, hacking never happens in the first attempt. Obviously, we would have had tried at least multiple number of times, and in the process, after some time, he finds out the vulnerabilities, and he'll say that he'll try to hack the system. Had you seen the log files very frequently, somebody is trying to access your systems, you can immediately find out and see that hacking doesn't take place. This is the typical diagram from NIST. So, for example, the bottom things are the actual control systems, and in the demilitarized zone, you have the servers where the data is available. You have a firewall, and in fact, even the operator, reactor operator, is sitting behind the firewall, and even for him, the access controls are provided and checked, and he with the appropriate checks and balances only can access even the servers, and never connected to internet or internet. What are the various implementation methodologies? Procurement and institution policy, though looks silly, is a very important thing in the current world. I'm sure most of you might have heard the equipment that is coming from certain countries are coming with some hardware trojans. There are even ICs, hardware ICs that are coming with hardware trojans. Is not a rare incident. There are many incidents are reported. In fact, even few aeroplanes crashed because of the hardware trojans. In fact, I'm working now. Currently, my interest is hardware trojans, and myself and my colleagues are working on that particular hardware trojan. Air gap between the plant network and internet. This is something very important. As I mentioned to you, never connect plant network to internet and maintain the air gap. You should have a firewall. You should have a whitelisting. What are the various processes that have to be run? What are the various devices that can be connected? Or in fact, we don't call it whitelisting the people, but it's nothing but that. So, for example, XYZ can be access the system and ABC cannot access, mean that you are whitelisting him. Host level security, this is important. In fact, if you do host level security very well, in fact, most of the problems are solved, and in fact, you could achieve high level of security. Intrusion detection and prevention systems you can provide. And if the processing power permits, you do encrypt your commands so that you protect from the hackers. Physical security is extremely important. Anyhow, we are going to talk on 24th. In fact, of all these things, anyhow, this is something I do not know how many of you have gone to any nuclear facility. It's not such an easy thing to get into a nuclear facility. Physical security is extremely tight, and various security mechanisms have been done. Security auditing and cyber security. Postal security, what are the various things which we do? I'm going deeper into that. Maybe it's load latest OS and updates and patches. Load minimum essential modules. Even if you are working on Linux operating system, it comes with a DVD with hundreds of megabytes of various modules. All these modules are not really required for your reactor operation, and very minimal modules are required. Load only those modules and control the permissions appropriately. Enable only those essential services. Keep only the required user IDs. In fact, even if you load the Linux operating system, in fact, at least 10 default user IDs with default passwords get loaded. Remove all the unwanted user IDs and change the passwords for those things, and reduce the number of programs that are running with super user ID permission, that is administrator permission. You should reduce. With experience it comes what are the programs and the processes that should run with the super user ID permission, and change all important file permission, read, write, execute permissions. You have to change appropriately depending on your process, and never give a permission, execute permission to a fellow who is not supposed to execute it. And there are multiple, again, this is difference in depth. You configure etc.dos host.allow, that is which system can access your computer, or you can access your server. You can control through configuring etc host.allow and host.deny, and configure IP tables, something very similar, but this is another level of thing. Who can access which computer system on which particular port. Disable core dumping. This is another important thing, because any system has got a limited amount of hard disk space and memory space. If you create an incident where the core has dumped, may your core complete core may complete exhausted, and it will cause a denial of service attack. Change attributes to the important files, mute and append wherever it is required. Whitelisting, this is what is extremely important, and this is what we do for most of the nuclear facilities or any strategic system. Whitelisting of computer systems. What are the various systems that can be connected to the plant network? You cannot bring any computer system and connect it to the switch. It should be MAC controlled, and it should be permitted by the maintenance engineer. You should test the particular system properly, that there are no malwares, no viruses inside, and then only you permit the enable that system to be connected to your plant network. Similarly, whitelisting of removable devices, even the devices that can be put into your computer systems, even like a USB drive, can be controlled. Whitelisting of application, this is again very important and essential thing, in the sense that Again, even in a Unix system, then in Windows, this unlimited number of applications will be running at any point of time. Many of them are simply useless for the application which we are doing it. But even in Linux, many applications will be there. But for your operation, what are the applications that should be run? You make a script and see that only those applications run and no other application runs. And this is application whitelisting. Application whitelisting versus blacklisting. There is always a conversation or a discussion on people that how do we whether do whitelisting or blacklisting, because malware programs do come on a daily basis. So blacklisting is a little difficult, whereas what are the programs, processes which I should run, we know. So we are doing the whitelisting. Is how it works is basically I'm having a script program. I'm mentioning what are the various processes that should run and what are the permissions with which those application processes should run. I'm giving the script program, and the script program is running with high priority and high confidentiality. People can only read, they cannot alter that other than the administrator. So it is protecting your system. Risks of using application whitelisting is, again, so for example, for some reason, all of a sudden for maintenance purposes, you want to run one more process. It doesn't allow you to run that process, though it's a valid process. You have to make the change in the script. And runtime monitoring. So for example, a program should not take more than few seconds, but it is taking few minutes, and means you should have timeout parameters have to be configured properly, and you should ensure that runtime monitoring is also there so that your systems are safe. Is strict gap, air gap sufficient? Normally people, even from the nuclear field or any from that matter, even strategic organizations, people, they do say that air gap, you do a strict air gap, whether that is sufficient. Yes, for that also technology has come, where through air hopper you can hack into an isolated computer using frequency modulated signals. Bit whisper, hacking an air gapped computers to heat, side channel attack to extract the secret keys from the air gapped computers also it can be done. So to conclude, my time is getting over, and cybersecurity is important in all facets, be it office automation, database servers, computing servers, or SCADA systems that are used in nuclear facilities. Intruders can get in at any level, at design level, manufacturing level, commissioning level, operation, maintenance. How it can happen in design level? My computer, my IC, which is being imported, unfortunately today in our country, most of the ICs are being imported, and if I am getting from any foreign country for a strategic organization, he knows that it is going to be used in this particular organization. He can always send with some hardware trojan. He can design hardware trojan at that level itself. Consequences can be disastrous when you, especially if all the systems fail and if the hacker is very, very smart. So you have to be always awake. It should be 24/7. Beware that there are no weekends for the hackers. In fact, most of the hacking incidents happen at the night time and on weekends only. So you have to be very careful. You shouldn't say that fellow will be taking off today, so let me also go home and take rest. That cannot happen. And be sure and be always remember, security is a journey and not a destination. You can't say that I have secured all my systems at this minute. Yes, you are safe at this minute. Next minute, you cannot be sure. So it's a destination. If the reactor is operating for 60 years, you have to follow all these guidelines for all these 60 years. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir, for the excellent presentation. We all are delighted and now much more aware about the possibilities of cyber threats, and we shall surely take care. So we have a question for you from Professor Jain.
Hello,
Yes, sir.
Ashna.
Good evening.
Can you hear me? Good evening, Dr. Murthy.
Thank you, sir.
You have given such a wonderful talk, and I have for the first time come to know about so many aspects of cybersecurity.
Thank you. Thank you, sir.
Yeah, and I have a very general question.
Yes, sir.
that digitization is the norm now. Everybody is going for digitization of everything.
Yes, sir.
And our Prime Minister has given the slogan of Digital India. And this is bringing a huge number of problems also with it. So in a very sensitive installation like a nuclear power reactor or something, where you want to go for digitization, is it economically very attractive option, or there is no other way we can do without it? Because it is raising a lot of problems also there. And the experts that you need for cyber security, they are very expensive people. Yeah.
No, I mean, to make the answer short, the digital systems are much more cheaper when compared to analog systems.
Okay.
Maintenance is much cheaper, and the replacement is much cheaper. So the overall capital cost as well as maintenance cost will certainly come down if you go for digital. And obviously, you have to add the component of cyber security on the salaries of the cyber security people. But unfortunately, though I have spent 30-35 years in cyber security field, I'm not really played that lucrative salaries, and I don't think that. But we did work. I mean, working in a nuclear organization itself is a privilege for me. I really enjoyed it. I never really looked at my pay pack. Yes, the cyber security specialists are in great demand, but we are producing also. We are. It's not that, as is the case about 10 years back. It's not that we have a very limited number of cyber security specialists. But when you come to strategic organizations, again, you cannot outsource this job to outside people. You should have your own cyber security team. And when you are calculating your manpower for operating the reactor, how much manpower is required, that cyber security team also, that manpower also should be included.
Yes. Thank you. Very nice. Yeah.
Thank you.
So we have another question from our young mind, and Agre is asking about what are the procedures to test the integrity of the operating system and applications in order to continually improve the security.
Yes, madam. You told young, I couldn't see the person, but because I am grey haired, I can answer this question. This is exactly one reason why people are moving towards open source programs. So, for example, Windows is very comfortable. I'm sure even 5th standard student is operating a laptop with Windows operating system. And he has to struggle if it is going to a Linux operating system or Unix operating system. Various variants are there in Unix operating system. There are various open source operating systems are there, where they are in the open source for quite some time. The source code is available, and people are sharing the knowledge when they find any bug in particular that operating system. They are sharing the knowledge, and they are putting outside world that such a bug is there, and they are on a free basis they are providing the service. And still, if you are not comfortable, one thing is, even in the Unix operating system, the number of modules that are there is quite less, very less, just a small percentage of what Windows provides. But even that, in just 10% of what Unix provides is more than sufficient for operating a reactor. So those processes you can validate, or you can get it validated by outside people. But one good thing is, if you get the operating system from an authorized this thing, I mentioned, you know, that your procurement policy also has to be proper. Don't prevent, I mean, rather skip the step of procuring the operating system from a authorized dealer. Just don't go with a CD or a DVD to somebody and copy that and create this thing. Whatever viruses are there in his system also come to your DVD and it'll affect the system. But yes, certainly it's a problem. There is no doubt about it. Operating system is one area. When we are talking about the application softwares, verification and validation is the solution. And we have to do by a third party who are knowledgeable, both in IT technology as well as the plant technology, plant INC technology. And you have to get it verified and validated. And operating systems, we never had any problem that has come knowingly a bug being put in an operating system. But that does happen in commercial softwares. Commercial softwares, I don't want to name them. Yes, there are many instances where commercial softwares do come with bugs or viruses. You have to be careful. But that's not the case with open source operating systems and application softwares.
Thank you, sir.
I hope I could answer your question.
Yes, sir. There is another concern with some of the students stating that there are, on large facilities, there are many levels, a lot of technology involved, and you need to keep or pass on the information manually to multiple people. So is that a valid form of threat which is posed? And if we take into consideration defense in depth aspects?
Normally, the reactor operators are well trained. First, their antecedents are very much checked. Then they are trained in the classroom for about an year. Then they are trained on the simulator for about 6 months. So they know what they are supposed to do. It's not that we recruit a fellow and tell what are the instructions which he is supposed to do. It's not that we hand over a sheet of paper to him and send him to the control room. No, he will not even be allowed into the control room unless he passes the examination. The regulatory bodies, he has to undergo the classroom examination, he has to undergo the simulator examination, and finally he has to qualify himself to be a operator, qualified operator. After he acquiring enough amount of knowledge, then only is permitted inside the control room. And it's not that information is passed on, it's not that logbook or operating procedure book is passed on from one individual to the other. No.
Okay, right. There is another question on creation of firewalls, data encryption, and rerouting network. Is it a good measure to prevent attacker threats, or it is still insufficient?
No, when we are talking in defense in depth, so for example, whether one fellow, one fellow is attacking you, whether one fellow is able to just one level of road you have, or one level of wall you have, or multiple levels of walls you have. So for example, I will give a very mundane example, which when I discuss with students, and she has mentioned that you are also a student. So for example, when you are going outstation, you lock your locker in the cupboard. You lock the cupboard also. You lock the room also. You lock the house also. Why you are doing multiple defenses? When you are anyhow locking the house outside, why your locker has to be locked? Because even if one level is broken, you have multiple levels are there.
Right.
So having a firewall, having intrusion detection and protection system are certainly useful. But they do add some latency. Please take care of that.
Right. Thank you, sir. Another question: is cybersecurity also adding to the fears of the society that nuclear power might not be a good alternative?
Did we stop net banking?
No.
Anybody for that matter. In fact, the young generation who is talking about, they are much more comfortable than the oldies. And today you cannot live without. In fact, the mobile phone has become part of your body, and you do all net transactions or net banking transactions using mobile. That means there are possibilities are there, but they are fairly secure. How many incidents you are finding? We have so many banks, millions of transactions are taking place every day. We hardly find not even 0.001% transactions being wrong transactions. I think when you are improving in technology, these things, I think everything has a price. Everything has a price. Maybe I don't expect you to keep lakhs of rupees. I mean, it depends on how much is more for you. Don't keep lakhs of rupees. Maybe keep 50,000 rupees, and if you keep drawing every time 10,000 rupees, maybe keep 50,000 rupees and keep other money in some other location. Or you have two accounts where you enable net banking only for one account and don't enable net banking for the other account.
Yes. Sir, in terms of cyber threats, what do we do for defense in depth concept? What multiple measures? There is another question which is coming from Vaishnavi.
So, for example, first to make people understand better, I'll take a general IT system. I'll not. I'll come to network. Nuclear facility thing after a minute. For example, when we are having a network where we are browsing the internet, it is connected to a router, to the external world. Router itself has got many security features built in. You have to enable them. It's not that it is coming with all the security features. The iOS that is coming with the router, you can enable those security features. You enable those security features. Then you have a firewall where who can access what, who can access which program, who can access which server, who can access which service. Please put that. You have an intrusion detection protection system. You have where once again you can put all these controls. You have a host level security level. The host, actually the host which is running the program, there itself again you can have controls, who can access your computer system, which service they can run. Then you can do whitelisting. There are multiple, at least 5-6 levels of security levels we can do. And the person who is trying to hack, he will be able to hack at the first level. At the most second level, he can never reach the final level. So, for example, if you are operating 400 plus reactors, at least 50% of them are these days today, and you don't hear any hacking incident from a reactor. Those a few, just some 4-5 things I have mentioned to mention that it's not that nuclear field is highly safe or something. That is also vulnerable, but you have to be cautious.
Yes. Right. Thank you, sir. I think this discussion can go on for another hour, but we have to move to the next speaker. So to all the participants, we can take up the rest of the questions during the panel, which is on 24th. So, and I can pass on these questions to sir if he can answer to you personally or through me. We can take those questions later.
Yes, we can do that.
We move on to the next presenter.
Thank you very much, madam. Thank you,
Thank
Dr.
you,
Goyal.
thank you so much, sir.
Thank you,
Thank you so much,
University.
sir, for
I
a wonderful
I
presentation.
would have been happier had I come to the campus, but I know the challenges.
Yes,
I
sir,
appreciate
definitely we would like to invite you to our campus.
No, I'm
And
not talking
whenever the
about that.
situation will be normal.
I'm appreciating that in spite of this challenging situation, you are trying to impart education on advanced topics to students and faculty. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you.
So then moving on with the agenda, the next presentation will be on physical protection systems and the vulnerability to cyber threats. I request Mr. Daniel Johnson to kindly introduce the speaker to our audience. Thank you.
Thank you, Archana. It was great to see all those questions coming in. So please keep your questions coming in for Dave as well. That was a wonderful discussion. I'm going to move, I think I should move my introduction to the exercise to tomorrow so we can give Dave enough time to also do his presentation and take questions. I think we need to give him the proper time as well. So Dave is going to be providing us with this presentation on physical protection systems and how they're vulnerable to cyber threats. I've known Dave for a while now. He's a real expert on these topics, so we're very lucky to have him here with us. He's got over 40 years of experience in safeguarding and protecting nuclear and other radioactive materials. He's a training manager for the U.S. Defense Threat Reduction Agency's Kazakhstan Nuclear Security Engagement Project. And he's developed and conducted over 48 nuclear security training courses for Kazakhstan nuclear sites and the government agencies there. He's also the former senior nuclear security training officer at the International Atomic Energy Agency. And I worked with Dave when I was in Vienna as well, when he managed the International Network for Nuclear Security Training and Support Centers. It's a massive network. I think over 60 different training centers from all over the world are a part of that network now. And Dave was also the secretary for the International Nuclear Security Education Network. So he works with the training centers and all the universities doing nuclear security education all over the world. Previously, he was also the deputy director for program development for the Global Security and Non-Proliferation Program Office at the Oak Ridge National Laboratory, working on a variety of projects. And you can read more about him in the bio at the end of the agenda. But without further ado, I'll turn it over to you, Dave. And again, please, everyone, continue submitting your questions. Thanks so much. And thank you, Dave.
Okay. Thank you very much, Dan. I'm glad to be here. Thank you for the invitation and the connections here so that we can all share our ideas and our thoughts together. And I think Arcana is going to be so kind as to move my slides and things around. So we can go ahead and start the screen sharing and we'll move directly into this because Dr. Satyamurthy brought up so many different points about security, and I noticed that a lot of the questions are talking about this interface. And one of the things I want to explore with you today, it's this morning for me, this evening for you, but one of the things that I want to explore, let's move on to the next slide, because this talk and my presentation is literally broken up into two sections. The first section is the fact that part of this defense in depth and the systems that we're talking about all require some level of physical protection. But I'm going to expand that topical area of physical protection, if you'll allow me today, to include more than just what we consider to be protection measures, because I'm going to integrate during this talk a lot of the safety aspects. You know, in many countries, and I've done a lot of work in Russia, and in Russia, the word for safety and the word for security are the same word. And there's a reason for that, because they are so closely intertwined in operating facilities that cybersecurity, I think, has really focused us on the fact that the safety and the security systems that we have traditionally thought of have to be even more integrated today. And the more they're integrated, the more cooperation and the more, I guess, coordination occurs at an operating facility. The second part of my talk is the second bullet here is that even though we need a lot of the physical protection measures for our cyber systems and our computer systems and information security and everything, those systems in themselves are also vulnerable to cyber attack. And I've noticed that some of the questions were related to that right there. And Karen Kaldenbach later on is going to talk about the insider threat, because that insider threat, as she will talk about, means that most of our physical protection systems, the traditional ones, are vulnerable to cyber attack and can influence or impact significantly the cyber systems themselves or the computer systems themselves. But I'm going to even expand that a little bit more and talk about some of the safety systems that can indirectly impact the cybersecurity of an INC system. Let's go to the next slide that talks about a physical attack versus a cyber attack. Now, Don Dudenhafer is a real expert on these topics, And he and I at the agency in Vienna have had many discussions about this particular topic. I'm not going to read each and every one of these bullets. You can read those for yourselves. I just want to highlight a few on both sides so that you can get an idea of the considerations of where some of this discussion needs to go. If you'll notice in the physical attack, the light blue section in the box there, the third bullet down says that the attack would occur on site or from nearby. And of course, when we think about traditional physical protection and physical security, the adversaries, we focus a lot on the outsiders, so they're going to come in and they're going to physically attack the facility. Well, if there's a cyber attack, contrasting that to a physical attack, a cyber attack will happen remotely. It's part of the virtual world, if you will, and it can come from anywhere. It doesn't necessarily have to be a local attack. It can happen. We've seen many instances, and you'll hear throughout the other presentations, attacks that have happened from other countries, other organizations in other member states of the IAEA. So that's one of the major differences. The next bullet that I'd like to compare is that attacks are not usually easily repeated when we talk about physical attacks. It takes a lot of resources. Things have to come in together. The timing has to be right. There's a mobilization factor. But when there's a cyber attack, those attacks can be repeated as often as there are seconds in an hour. And so the attacks are easily repeated under a cyber attack. And we may not even be conscious that those attacks are taking place. The last one I want to focus on this particular slide is down near the bottom, the next to the last one, is that the attribution of an attack, when it's a physical manifestation, the attribution of that is usually possible. We can identify, that's our adversary, we have to go out and we have to do this and we have to do that, and we know who they are, we know where they're from, we know what their capabilities are, all those kinds of things. But when we talk about cyber attacks, and they're part of the virtual world, and they're coming from unknown sources, being able to attribute that to a known adversary is most likely impossible, at least in the few hours during the initiation of the attack. So I wanted to bring that up here to put some of the following slides and discussions into a perspective of the difference between what we face in cyber attacks and what we face in physical attacks. On the next slide, let's talk about the design basis threat, because this is something that's near and dear to Don's heart, and it's something that the world as a whole is dealing with right now. The design basis threat for decades now has focused on that physical attributes, the physical attacks. And so the design basis threat was about adversaries attacking facilities to steal material, to cause sabotage, to divert material into other unauthorized locations and all those kinds of things. But no particular design basis threat for computers was discussed up until the last several years. Now, today, if you look at the IAEA guidance documents, computers are covered one of two ways, basically. Computers are integrated into an existing design basis threat document, and those considerations are made part of the entire threat assessment that goes into the design basis threat. Or a member state may consider computer or cyber DBT as a separate document that has to be considered alongside the more physically oriented design basis threat document. Now, there's issues with either one, but those are the two manifestations, if you will, of the cyber DBT and how the world is beginning to look at the integration of those things. And that's part of what I wanted to talk about today. Let's move on to the next slide. keep that in mind about the DBT, because one of the questions had to do with this defense in depth that Dr. Satyamurthy mentioned before. This is just a very simple diagram, but what I wanted to overlay here is that all those areas, the limited areas, protected areas, vital areas, they have definitions from a security standpoint of what they are, what the access authorizations are, clearance levels, all those kinds of things, and they are progressively more intense as you move toward the materials of vital interest. So if you notice, this is oriented more toward nuclear material, so that you got category 3, category 2, category 1. Now, above that, though, is the safety systems targets. And I want to focus on that box and the box below it about the inner area, because the red line that you see running through these security areas that we're most familiar with, that IT network, if you notice, it kind of stops there at the inner area. And I put this slide up just for the reason of making a point, is that there's an extension of that red line that goes into that hardened area. And it's another air-gapped system that a lot of people don't talk about, but it's the nuclear material accounting system. And there may be workstations and computer connections for information gathering, inventory controls, tracking material between material balance areas and other things. We're not here to talk about that today, but I want you to consider that that red line of that IT network extends on into the areas where the category 1 nuclear material may be. And that's really true for both nuclear material and radiological materials. Although the categorizations might be a bit different, the same principles, I think, still apply. All of the protection measures that we traditionally think about then are focused on a central alarm station where the monitoring and control of sensors and cameras and those things for security all take place. But most of the time, that central alarm station is somewhere in one of those boxes. If it's way out here in the limited access area, it's probably less protected than it would be if it was inside the inner area or the vital area. And that's one place where the security considerations come into play of where do you place physically the computer system that governs and manages and controls your physical protection system. And we'll talk about that more in just a minute. Let's go on to the next slide. Now that we've got that, what kinds of things do we do from a physical protection standpoint to protect those computer systems as part of the defense in depth that Dr. Satyamurthy was talking about? The first indication is on the next slide, and this is the computerized assets that must have some type of physical access control. Now, that's, of course, different layers too. So defense in depth means different things as we talk about the hierarchy of protections that are in place. So we have locked doors, we have access controls, we check people's authorization, we have them have badges. We, on the computer systems themselves, we may lock the computer down to a physical location. We may use fingerprints and passwords and all those kinds of things, because the electronic compromise can also equate to a degradation or a loss of those physical protection functions. So if the access control system, as was previously discussed, for the room is compromised in some way, then unauthorized people can get into the room and have unauthorized access physically to that computer or that cyber system. And then from a physical protection standpoint, the attack scenarios then for our cyber systems can take on both an electronic, through the Ethernet, through the internet, through removable media, those kinds of things, introduction of viruses and malware, or a physical attack where you try to interrupt the service, or you trying to destroy the system so that you can hide what you've been doing out in the operating area. And we'll talk about more about that a little bit later on. Let's go to the next slide and look at a couple of more physical protection controls. And this is where I want to get into protection of the cyber systems, but not necessarily from the security standpoint, because there's fire safety factors built into any type of computer or cyber system. And they have to be specialized fire safety systems too. You don't want to use a water fire suppression system in a computer room. So there's special fire safety considerations that have to be applied, but we'll get into some of the protection measures about that in just a second. There's also the failure of supporting utilities. I want to talk about that. I want to talk about structural collapse. Those can directly and adversely affect the protections cocoon around a computer or cyber system that may be a key asset for your facility. And then there's just the plumbing leaks. There may not necessarily be a water fire suppression system running through the ceiling of a computer room, but we'll talk about some of the plumbing leaks that may occur that have nothing to do with the computer system itself, but exist in the building. One of the other things about physical protection controls is distance from walls and the ability of adversaries who want to get access to your data. Did you know that the computer systems themselves have emanations, electromagnetic emanations that can be picked up and translated? And if you're close enough, you can translate those emanations, and you can get a lot of good classified information about the protection systems and anything else that's going on to protect those cyber systems. And then there's also mobile and portable systems that may have their own levels of vulnerability if they're made part of the overall physical protection or the security scheme around a cyber or computer security system. So let's go to the next slide, and this is going to start walking through each of those points. So within the broad scheme of access controls for a computer or cyber system, we want to restrict the entry and exit of personnel. We have information security rules, need to know. There may be restrictions on who has access to certain areas. And so we always want to do that and control the entry and exit of personnel as much as we can, channel them through the proper entry and exit points so that they can't get access in any other way. Wiring locations becomes very important. Where are the electrical panels? Are they inside of the computer room or are they outside? Are they susceptible to being interrupted without ever gaining access to the computer room? What about the power to the building? Can the building itself be turned off to impact the ability and maybe deny the service of a cyber system or some type of instrumentation and control system? There's also supporting services, maintenance, locksmiths, cleaners, janitors, all those kinds of people may have access into an area, protected area. Are there controls and rules and procedures in place to keep them from carrying in removable media or the CDs and some of those other things that can introduce viruses into what we consider a closed system or one that is completely air-gapped? And that's what Dr. Satya-Murthy was talking about earlier, is that we call them air-gapped, but we also have to be very conscious that there's ways of physically introducing viruses and malware and dangerous items into our cyber systems without connecting them to the internet. And then there's this whole idea And we've had this discussion a lot in Kazakhstan, where I've been working lately, and that's the backup media. How is the information backed up even in an air-gapped system? Is it done on removable media? Is it pushed to the cloud somewhere that can be exploited if it's going outside and using some type of external storage location? So those are considerations too when we talk about access control to our systems and our data. The next slide goes a little bit deeper into one of the other things, and that's the fire safety factors. Smoke is very dangerous and can be very harmful to a computer or a cyber system. So making sure that fire dampers and those kinds of things actually work. And then this is where I'm going to introduce the idea that many of our safety systems now are also digitized, and they're being controlled, IP controlled. Part of my house now is a smart house. I can get on my phone and I can turn on the pool pump. I can activate lights and televisions and do all those kinds of things. Look around your buildings, look around your facilities. How many places are actually controlled remotely by IT-based systems? And those are susceptible to hacking that can indirectly impact your cyber and computer systems. And I'm going to talk about a series of those as we go through here. Corrosive gases, even though a facility, if we're talking about sabotage and I want to evacuate a facility, then I don't have to necessarily cause something inside that area. I can cause toxic fumes by setting fire to the couch in the ladies' restroom and release all kinds of toxic fumes from naugahyde and leather and plastics that are just all around the area. So there's another place where safety and security have to be concerned about the same things, because in essence, we're all after the same thing. We want to protect people and we want to protect our very important property and assets. Another thing is high humidity. If the air conditioning or HVAC system that keeps the computer systems cool is impacted somehow and the humidity starts rising, that can be very detrimental and harmful to computer and cyber systems. So it's an indirect cause and effect instance that we have there. The next one on the list was one that I thought was very interesting when I was putting this presentation together. Let's move to the next slide because it talks about supporting utilities. Think about your power systems and where the controls for those are. Are they physical controls? Are they wireless controls? Are there routers all over around the cyber system or the control room that aren't directly inside where the reactor controls or anything else might be impacted, but the control of all those things can be adversely impacted by an outside attack and cause problems within those rooms. That can be the electric power, shutting the power off. How long do you have uninterruptible power? Is there backup power? How long will the generator last? All those kinds of questions come into play, not only from a safety standpoint, but a security and a physical protection standpoint. The heating system, the air conditioning system that I mentioned before. What about water? Introduction of water in there, and we'll talk about plumbing leaks here in just a minute. Sewage, backing up sewage into a facility can cause a massive evacuation because everybody wants to stay safe, but that is something that can be running through, around, or underneath a computer location that can be adversely affected, and then it causes a problem around the area where your cyber or computer system is. Think about all of the other utilities that are in place. Let's move to the next slide and talking about structural collapse. Look at Fukushima and the concerns after the fact, after the tsunami hit and all the damage was in place. The major security concern was that no one was allowed to enter that facility So they couldn't account for the material as they normally would. They couldn't look at the security systems as they normally would. They couldn't monitor the security systems and safety systems as they normally would. That's the officials. That's the ones that are authorized to be there. Potential adversaries don't operate by those rules. They can go in there and they can do things. So you have to be aware of the contingencies needed to offset the structural collapse. In certain areas of the world, you have to worry about snow loads on the roofs of buildings. Are there items and chemicals and things around that could cause an explosion that would adversely impact or knock out your cyber or computer system, including the physical protection system? And of course, fire is always a major consideration when we're talking about extrinsic threats, both in the safety and the physical protection world. The next one is the one that I keep referring to on the next slide, and that's plumbing leaks. We had a situation in Oak Ridge where we had a computer room, and it had this very nice halon system at that time to suppress any fires that might break out in the computer room. But nobody paid any attention to the fact that all of the water lines that went to the bathrooms in the upstairs portion of the building all ran right over the computer room. So if you can introduce something, flush a little detonation device down the toilet and it passes through, or you get the water lines somehow impacted, then you can drop a lot of water into your computer room, which can destroy, of course, all of your data and the systems and everything else. So that's a major consideration. And reducing that risk can be a very expensive undertaking, because moving utility lines generally after the fact can be very expensive and time consuming. So it, just as Dr. Satyamurthy mentioned, you have to do a lot of these renovations by design. Do them up front and think about these things up front. Let's move on to the next slide. I think we're going to go into the interception of data. And of course, there's direct observation. So people that come in and look over the shoulder of operators and get information like that, they may be authorized, but those are the insiders that Karen Kaldenbach is going to talk about later, and that Dr. Satyamurthy talked about earlier. This insider threat is something that physical protection has not necessarily had to deal with in the past, other than the access control systems and doing physical searches and that kind of thing. I've mentioned electromagnetic interception, and that is a very real concern. It's one of the reasons in the physical protection world that we're not necessarily in favor of wireless intrusion detection sensors out in the field, because those emanations and conversations between the transmitters and receivers can be intercepted and translated, and you can figure out from that where materials are located within a building simply because of the locations of the sensors. So it's something to think about from an IT and cyber perspective, and that impacts the physical protection world. Let's go on to the next slide. And we have these mobile and portable systems, laptop computers carried in and out of rooms. Those can introduce viruses and malware and facilitate these various denial of service attacks. You have to be very careful about introducing such things. They're very powerful tools for us to use, but they also can be very powerful tools that a potential adversary might use against us. So there have to be controls, maybe securely store those if they're outside the security area, and only bring them in when absolutely necessary, and put in a lot of those protections that Dr. Satyamurthy mentioned earlier on software. Don't just be changing things. Have protection measures, two-person rule, software development, configuration management. Those are all very important protection measures that we don't necessarily think is physical protection, but they are in fact physical protection measures. encrypting data on stored media, and then the compensatory measures that might be put in place if physical protection measures fail. The most, I guess, visible example I can think of is the access control system for the controls into a computer room. If that fails, what's the backup system? Do you go to a paper system? Do you post someone at the door? Is there authorization lists? Have those contingencies been planned for? And so those mobile and portable systems may be your first line of defense at some point in time if certain types of attacks start to occur. Let's move on to the next slide. And that is the fact that here we have this layered protection and defense in depth, and we rely a lot on access controls and physical protection systems, but they themselves are vulnerable to cyber attack. And let's talk about a few of the ways that they're vulnerable. Let's move on to the next slide, and we'll move into that section of the presentation. So if you look at IAEA Nuclear Security Series number 13, in section 4.10, it talks about computer-based systems, and it's making an assumption here. And one of the questions that came in during the previous presentation was, is it a good idea to go totally to digitization? Should we move everything to an IT-based system, or is it better to leave some things analog? So here in Nuclear Security Series 13, there's an assumption that computer-based systems will be used in the future for physical protection, nuclear safety, and nuclear material accountancy and control. That's true, but there are still a lot of analog systems out there, and it's up to the facilities themselves to start making those determinations whether switching to a digitized system is in their best interest in all cases. The IEA also says that these systems, these computer-based systems, have to be protected against compromise. And it mentions 3 examples there. There's more, of course, but these are the 3 ones that I think most everybody is concerned about. That's the cyber attack, the fact that the data or the information or the system can be manipulated, or falsification of credentials and things that would give unauthorized people access as if they were authorized, making them insiders, even though they have no business being there. And so everything is tied back to, and I want to emphasize this point here, it's tied back to the threat assessment and the design basis threat. It goes back to that, one of those first slides, is cyber protections included in your overall design basis threat to incorporate the protections for the actual physical protection systems themselves, or is it a standalone document that can miss things if it's not coordinated properly internally? Let's move on to the next slide, not taking up any more time. Where do we have computers in physical protection? Well, my gosh, they're all over the place. Not only do we have the computer system at the central alarm station, but as was mentioned before, there's data gathering panels out in the field, these alarm systems and camera systems and access control systems. The information is gathered up at various locations. It depends on how the system is designed. So in today's world, there are computers all over the physical protection system, and they have to be protected just like your data control systems that you have in instrumentation and control for safety systems for nuclear power plants. All those computer systems need to fall under the same safety and security principles, I think. And most of these exist as a complex network of embedded systems. And I use the word here embedded because they include systems that may have access to the outside world through the internet or intranet, but there are also air-gapped systems that are also vulnerable, and we'll talk about that in just a second. Okay, next slide. We have them all over the place. So here's a little diagram you can use for future reference. I'm not going to read, of course, everything that's on this slide, I do want to point out a couple of things on this slide. If you look down the middle of the hierarchical structure there under detectors, there's fire, smoke, and intrusion detection, and those are sometimes all integrated into one location. They may be different systems, but they're all tied together in one place. Down there, it's disabling the systems. That's first and foremost. But underneath that, you can clear the logs. You can force alarms that might cause evacuations. Or the last one mentioned in that box is altering the sensibility settings. And if you think about that, that's a whole lot more discreet than disabling. If you were to hack into the central alarm station computer and you disable some sensors or a couple of cameras or an access control device on a vault door or anything like that, the operator is going to notice that pretty readily. But if you just alter it so that it disables itself, or it goes into a hold mode because it thinks the door is open, those can slip by an operator if they're not paying really close attention or there's a lot of other activity going on. And those discrete modifications can be much more effective than just disabling a sensor. The other one that I want to point out is all the way over on the right under access control and badges and PIN codes. Again, disabling, reading, modifying those. If you drop down all the way to the bottom, the denial of service, you could deauthorize a specific badge on a specific door. That's just one form of the denial of service, but you could keep people out of a vault area for days, weeks, months. And if you needed access in there for some reason, that denial of service can cause all kinds of operational uproar. You can't do your proper inventories. When you can't do your inventories, you're not meeting the requirements of the regulator. All those kinds of things we have to think about in different terms these days because of the cyber protections that are required. Okay, next slide. Excuse me. This is a pictorial description of the previous slide. I just wanted to put that out there just so you can see all the kinds of different devices that are out there. Some things are in loops, and the digital conversations go in a circle. Some of them are star configurations where you have a central location that's talking to many different things, like in the hub of a wheel. And that's what this is trying to depict here. But the point here is that it's a wide variety of network components in your security system. And I would include in that your fire protection systems. And if you'll notice there in the middle, it says emergency exit, another safety system in nuclear facilities primarily, and we find them all over the place in nuclear power plants, is criticality safety systems. And if those are networked together, then they're just as vulnerable as any of the other safety systems. Let's go on to the next slide, and we can try to get through this. Don't want to take up, the whole rest of the day. I'm not going to go through each one of these, but these next three slides are talking about the overview of computer security in three hierarchical areas. So there's the sensor suite, and that includes a lot of things, and you'll see them mentioned there. And then there's the computer security considerations for that part of the physical protection system. So the sensor suite may be a simple design, or as we get more sophisticated in our intrusion detections and CCTV cameras, they may have their own processors that can be adversely impacted out in the field and get in the way of them doing their job and reporting violations back to the central alarm station like they're supposed to. And then these systems are managed internally, or they can be managed by subcontractors. Outsourcing is a big thing today in many of the operating facilities. And so the persons who are actually monitoring the system may not necessarily be the people who are responsible for the maintenance and care and feeding of those systems. Let's go on to the next one. It talks about the alarm processor box for signal routing. I was talking about some things go in a loop and you have to wait until everything reports before you get the information that there may be an alarm or a camera has discovered something. Some things are in a star configuration. It depends on what your physical protection system is, but it's normally a protected system. And here's where I think physical protection gives some physical idea of some of the things we can do in other systems, and that is monitored alarm lines. So each alarm line is monitored in a physical protection system so that if someone tries to tap into it or get access to the data running through that line, we know about it. And that is a big protection now in all the cyber systems that are digitized. And it's something that physical protection was doing a long time ago in the analog systems, and it's now being adapted more in the IT world. And so that's something where we have to work together, and it has to be very integrated. And we need a comprehensive computer security plan for everything that I've talked about. Let's go to the last slide in this section, and that's the alarm display. Dedicated lines or over an existing IP infrastructure. What's very prevalent, not necessarily in nuclear facilities, but what's very prevalent today is wireless detection systems where people can look on their phone. There's security directors now that can monitor their security system from their phone. That's very convenient, can be very good, but it also opens that particular avenue up for hacking and cyber attacks and different malware attacks and introducing the viruses. You have to be very careful about using those kinds of systems for high security assets. And the one thing, again, that's repeated throughout this little section is you gotta have a computer security plan. It has to be part of the facility's overall computer security plan. Physical protection is not immune to computer security rules or cybersecurity rules of the facility. Just because it's alarms and it's a standalone system, it is not exempt, and it should be made part of the overall computer security structure of the facility. Okay, next slide, and we're getting down to the end, I think. Here's an example. Everybody's going to throw out examples in their presentation, so I had to have an example. This one happened in Israel. Doesn't seem like much, but this particular instance caught my eye because it makes me wonder. I as a security professional, I'm always suspicious. And I always look at these things with a very suspicious eye. This cyber attack of this video surveillance system caused a lot of trouble, caused some damage, caused a lot of inconvenience. What was the goal or what was the motivation of the people who did this? Was it to cause that type of confusion? Or was it just a test to see how easy it was to do that? Or testing a tool that can interrupt video surveillance systems that could be used on a higher level asset? Those are the kinds of things that keep us security people up at night. And with that, I'll finish. Thank you very much. Open now for questions and comments.
Well, thank you, Dave, for that wonderful presentation. I see we had a cameo from your puppy there in the background as well. Very cute little dog. I was very struck by your presentation that we always think of cybersecurity kind of in this virtual realm, but you've really grounded it in the fact that our physical protection systems can be affected in a number of ways by different attacks. I mean, our cybersecurity systems can be affected by actual physical attacks instead of just virtual attacks that we're always worried about. But I don't know if people pay enough attention to the actual physical attacks that people can make to knock down these systems. So it was really great to have your presentation and have that perspective as well. We've got some really good questions that came in, and maybe we can take a few minutes to answer these. The first question, well, let me just mention real quick, we have a comment from Nitendra Singh about the India Youth Nuclear Society. So that's not a question for you, Dave, but just for everybody to see that, just take a look and sign up for that. And maybe we can give a moment for Nitendra to talk about it later in the week, kind of talk about it to everybody. But the question for you, Dave, and I love this question because it's very pertinent and relevant to what's happening now. It's about the pandemic situation, and with lowered manpower at the facilities, what does this do to affect the vulnerability of both physical and cybersecurity systems? How do we adopt mitigation measures during a pandemic to maintain the same level of physical and cybersecurity?
Well, I've been kind of following that and trying to capture news stories that are of how organizations are dealing with some of this, because there's not that many people there. And everyone's struggling because any system, as we all know, I mean, this is all common sense. This is not just magical security stuff, but you can have the best technology in the world, whether it's a safety system, a security system, or whatever, the reactor controls for a nuclear power plant. You can have the best technology in the world, but if you don't have people to maintain it and to go out and work on it when it needs to be updated and modified as necessary for the operation, then those systems are subject to fail. So yes, this is an excellent point, and I think it needs some consideration by some very smart, creative, innovative people. How can we remotely do this safely and securely using the existing systems? I'm not sure, and I'll open this up for discussion, but from my perspective, I'm not sure we're ready to deal with that question on a timely manner. I think that this is a question we're going to do the best we can right now. We'll send people in when we can. We're going to put some controls and compensatory measures and those kinds of things, and hope that it doesn't go too long so that all these start failing. But this is when we need to start looking at the future and the contingency planning and what goes into our computer security plans. A pandemic is one thing, but you can also have a major power failure. An entire city block could be, or an entire city, their power system could be taken down. From a security standpoint, those of us in the nuclear industry, we're impacted by everything else around us. So I'm not one that focuses on, I need to do critical infrastructure security. I need to worry about my power input and my substations and all those kinds. Well, what do those substations provide power to? Well, they provide them to nuclear power plants, and they provide them to reactor facilities and all those kinds of things. So the people at those sites also need to be worried and thinking about that critical infrastructure security too, from the standpoint that things outside can impact me. And so it's a bigger issue, and I think that we need to have more of this type of discussion about the integration and the interface of safety systems and security systems, so that those work more hand in hand and we take credit for it. When we talk about risk reduction and vulnerabilities and those kinds of things, we need to talk about those things more together.
Sounds like the perfect thesis for a graduate student doing nuclear engineering, right, Dr. Goel? That's right. Okay, let's. I know we're kind of over time, so let's take another question. Another great question here. It's about the kind of the protection of employee data in terms of where it goes in the database, like employee fingerprints, ID card information, passwords, where all this information is stored in the facility. And the question is how vulnerable is that information? Where is it typically stored within the network?
Well, that's one of the things that probably hasn't changed over the last several years, and that is access control systems generally operate one of two ways. I have a central database, and the technology out in the field on the door or the facility or whatever communicates back and forth and gets the data from that central database to authorize access to the facility or to a building or to a room. The other way that that works is that your system uploads the access control database on a routine status to those devices. There's smart devices out there on the doors. And so they can actually store the names of the people and their credentials that they'll use to get into the room without communicating back to the central database each time. So usually they're in one of those two situations. So how vulnerable are they? They're very vulnerable. They're as vulnerable as any database on any computer system. The other thing to take into consideration about access control, and I'm glad, who is this? Ashish Kumar brought this up, because if you think about it, where are your visitor control offices with your central database of access control names and information about badges and all those kinds of things? Is your visitor control system and your badge office, is it in your highest security area? Most of the time, in my experience, and I know in the US, that visitor control system with all that database and all that information sits in a property protection area with very little security around it other than what's there at the room. So I think that's one of the areas that we have to make it an integral part of the cybersecurity system of the facility, and look at it with a very keen eye of where that's located and how vulnerable that type of information is. And with people not visiting sites and things like that, then there's not as many people around, not many people actually accessing the facilities. So it goes back to the first question. Maybe that's where I go in and I do some things. If I'm an adversary, I could go in and fabricate some badges maybe, and nobody realizes that I've done that. It gets me access into some highly secure areas once everything opens back up. Got to think down the road. There's the immediate security, but then things can be happening right now that make you vulnerable a month from now or 3 months from now when everything opens back up.
Okay. Thank you. I was just about to ask you about what mitigation measures we could take, but I think you've answered that well in your response. Let's go to the last student question here, and the question's related to biometric systems, and how vulnerable are these biometric systems to hacking, I guess is kind of the question.
It's a record. It's a record. Fingerprints, hand geometry, those templates that are created to help identify that person is just like the information. It's electronic data that is pushed out to the device that allows the authorization. So it's no better or no worse from a vulnerability standpoint than just the badge reader, the proximity reader. The biometric system is more, it's more to control the person and validate that person's identity. So if I can hack into the system and I can create a new badge, well, I can also create a template for the biometric system too. Those can be separately encrypted, and we know that there's other protection levels within the cyber system that can be taken to provide additional protection within the system. But just from a principle standpoint, it's not any more or less vulnerable than any other data that's used in the access control system.
I know Idaho National Laboratory has done a lot of work defeating physical protection systems through attacking the associated cyber systems. Have they done something like that before, where they've hacked a biometric system and replaced somebody's handprint with another handprint? Has this been actually demonstrated that you've seen?
Oh yeah, well, if you talk to any of the manufacturers, they can give you failure rates, and that's your indicator. So you look at the failure rates of the individual systems. But I'll go back to Dr. Sathyamurthy's presentation, that defense in depth. In physical protection, let's talk about perimeters just for a second. We use complementary sensors because each sensor technology has its own vulnerabilities that can be bypassed or it can be defeated. So we put 2 or we put 3 sensors that take care of each other. So that's the defense in depth. That's the process. That's the principle we follow. We follow the same thing in cybersecurity. It's a defense in depth. It's layers of these types of protections. You don't rely just on a password. Maybe you have passwords and you have fingerprint and you have some type of visual face recognition or something to get access to certain high-level assets, computer assets. So the same principles apply. They just look different.
Right. It's just like when students are doing their online banking now, they might be required to do 2-factor authentication versus in the past, you just had the 1-factor authentication, which is much more vulnerable. But as soon as you start adding the multiple layers of authentication in there, then it becomes much more difficult to defeat that system.
Yeah, and I think Dr. Satyamurthy made that point very clear. When you're making software changes, you don't just make software changes to a very important program in a vacuum. You have protection measures in there to make sure that those software changes are valid and that they're not going to put the system at risk, or they're not going to create vulnerabilities because of the actions that system governs.
All right, I think looks like we're almost a half hour over for the whole session. Not your fault, Dave. With just lots of good discussion, lots of good questions, lots to talk about. And I think it's a really great subject. I find it to be fascinating and really appreciate the presentation, Dave. Let me turn it back over to Alpana and Archana to kind of wrap us up for the day, and we can come back. Oh, did you have a question, Alpana, before we wrap?
Yes, I have one question to Dave. How you will differentiate the risk and the threat in cybersecurity?
Whoa. Well, I guess I might have to put my philosophical hat on. I'm all in favor of this whole idea of the design basis threat being much more integrated, because the protections and everything that we're talking about are so integrated in an operational facility. The other thing that I would like to see happen in the discussions is that we make these considerations, and this is an excellent seminar, because we need to look at things more from the operational perspective instead of our own individual disciplines. So I've got cybersecurity experts, but they don't know physical protection principles, or they don't know safety standards and requirements. And so I think the more we can consider things and have that perspective from the operational side of the house, then that helps us integrate some of these disciplines more and more and more. And our young people that are now in the universities, they're learning this where it took me years to learn this, from actual experience. So I think the next generation is going to be much smarter and innovative and creative about making these types of integrations happen.
Thank you very much for covering all aspects in the physical protection system. Very nicely you have covered all the features and very detailed presentation. Thank you so much for the nice presentation. I have last question. How you mitigate the insider potential in cyber security? It is very dangerous if you talk about the cyber security. Insider is very, very important.
Again, from an operational perspective, I think this insider threat mitigation requires that the security people, the safety people, all have to talk to each other. It's all integrated. And the more we keep it separate and act like it's different disciplines,
yes,
the harder it is. For example, at Oak Ridge, where I grew up, where I began my career, one of the things that the security people took credit for in risk reduction to nuclear material was the radiation contamination controls that were in place for safety purposes, because that's a different monitoring system that's looking for the same thing we're looking for in security. They're looking for contamination, they're looking for materials, they're looking for radiation signatures. We do the same thing in security, but one is a safety system and one's a security system, but they're doing the same thing. So that's my example. And when we implemented RADCON, we call them radiation contamination controls, now there's dress out, physical dress out requirements where you have to put the booties on and you have to tape up your gloves and all those kinds of things.
Yes.
There's no place for me to hide nuclear material. So that's an insider mitigation measure to me, because it's a safety thing, but it makes the insider's job that much harder. We need those kinds of examples in the cyber world. And we're doing that. We're just not being as visible about recognizing it, I think.
And Karen will talk about this subject in more depth on day 3 as well. So Karen's entire presentation will be on this topic. So maybe she'll help answer that question a little bit further.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Dave. Now over to Archana for final.
Thank you. That was an excellent presentation and even a wonderful discussion. We've learned a lot today about cybersecurity, and I think we need to wrap up for the day, and we will start with the orientation to the exercises tomorrow. The first part will be dedicated to the orientation. I think we can stop here. I thank all the speakers for the excellent presentations and the audience for patient hearing and the excellent set of questions that have been posed here. Please do join us tomorrow at the same time, 6 to 8, and we look forward to having a more interactive session tomorrow in the exercises.
Archana, the same link will work for tomorrow also?
Yes, ma'am.
Or you will be sending new one?
Ma'am, I can confirm it.
Same link, same link.
Same, because here today many of them, they face lot of problem in joining.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, IT person.
Same link will work, and we will let you know about the groups tomorrow once you join. Thank you, everyone. Stay safe. Good evening. See you tomorrow. I thank you all for being here.
Thank you all.
Wonderful job as host.
Thank you. Thank you, Archana.
Thank you.